Hi, everyone. My name is Heather Crow. I'm a borehole geophysicist in the near surface geophysics group working here in Ottawa. And I'm working in Hazen's Archetypical Aquifer project. So this afternoon, I'll be giving an update on all the Archetypical Aquifer project activities that have been underway over the last year. Before I get going, I just want to acknowledge all my team members. This presentation is a team effort, and I just want to acknowledge all their contributions here on all the project members. The GSC's work in this project is highly leveraged with collaborators and collaborative funding. So we'd also like to acknowledge all the individuals that we're working with from these different agencies and institutions. So this presentation is going to progress through groundwater research that we're undertaking at a whole variety of scales, from the provincial scale down to the sub-millimeter pore scale at our field laboratories. We'll start by looking at the work relating to the 3D surficial sediment modeling work going on in Southern Ontario. Then I'll move down to the site scale, talking about the development of 3 GSC field laboratories for thematic aquitard and aquifer research. And I'll finish talking about methods development at Bedrock Field Laboratories and the testing of some new borehole geophysical technology with our university partners. I'll close off with some upcoming presentations where you can find more information on all of these activities. The project is completing a 3D regional surficial geology map of Southern Ontario. The model integrates the sub-regional modeling that's been carried out by the OGS, which you can see in these boundary regions here. The model contains 9 layers, including bedrock, and is going to be released in an open file this winter. It'll be viewable in a Leapfrog software viewer, but it'll also be available in an open data format. It'll be presented at the OGS Open House this winter, and the modeling work has been carried out by Charles Logan. Part of the effort of the 3D surficial sediment map has also involved establishing a regional scale geochemical framework of the sediments. The GSC, in collaboration with partners at the OGS and conservation authorities, has spearheaded using portable X-ray fluorescence spectrometry, or PXRF, to measure elemental chemistry of sediment cores. On the left, you can see an example of different elements measured in a core from the London area, and you can see the variation of all these elements across the various units. On the right is a map of the boreholes with PXRF analyzed cores shown by the yellow dots, with the 2 most recently analyzed boreholes here in the London area, shown on the western end of the transect. The black lines show the linking of all the various geochemical transects across the province, and this work has been carried out by Ross Knight. Another important upcoming contribution from the project is to the Groundwater project ebook series that's being led by John Cherry. This ebook is on the hydrogeology of the Oak Ridges moraine, and the work is being led by Rick Gerber and co-authored by Dave Sharp at the GSC. So now focusing down to a more site-specific scale, we move on to the development of our field laboratories. In Ottawa, we have 3 laboratories in different conservation authority areas. And in Guelph, we're also collaborating with the Morwick G360 Groundwater Research Institute at their Bedrock Field facility on the University of Guelph campus, so just down in this region. In our GSC field laboratories in Ottawa, we've been focusing on methods development and also archetypal characterization. This map shows the boundary of the city of Ottawa, and the colors just represent the depth of sediment cover over bedrock. So the green is where bedrock is at or near surface, and the red areas just represent basins filled with soft glacial sediment. The regional work has focused on seismic methods development, where you can see the seismic lines collected over the past years. The field laboratories where we're working now include first Bilberry Creek, which is in a suburb of Ottawa, of Orleans, where we've been looking at silt and clay aquitards. Further to the south, we have a field site here in Embrun, the town of Embrun, where we've been focused on sand and gravel aquifers. And finally, the Bells Corners Borehole Calibration Facility here in Ottawa has been looking at fractured bedrock aquifers. So we're covering a whole range of archetypal aquifers here. The work in the Bilberry Creek area includes 3 broad objectives. The first is investigating the geological, hydrogeological, and geochemical factors influencing geotechnical properties, particularly those influencing landslide behavior. The second objective is looking at interpreting geochemical changes arising from groundwater flow and diffusion in the Champlain Sea regional aquitard. And thirdly, to establish 2 new reference borehole sites in Champlain Sea sediment for further study. So currently in progress, work on thin sections, analyzing microfauna, geochemical conditions, and depositional processes. Data compilation are being completed and released soon for physical and geotechnical properties of the sediment. Also looking at paleoecological and isotopic analyses and environmental conditions and dating. And finally, we're looking at optimizing borehole NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance logging for porosity and links to mineral magnetism studies, something I'll be talking about a bit later on in the presentation. And the contacts for all this work are Mark Hinton and Sam Alpay. Turning to work now at our second field site in Enbrun. Here we have a sandy, gravelly, glacial esker aquifer that provides drinking water for the local community, but the aquifer is buried beneath Champlain Sea muds. Work here over a number of years has identified the axis of the buried esker at our test site, and we've established 4 fully screened and logged reference boreholes, which you can see here in the figure on the left. The blue lines represent where electrical resistivity profiles were collected along the course of the esker. Now, because geophysical properties depend on factors like sediment type and texture, porosity, and the presence of pore water, non-invasive geophysical surveys like these electrical resistivity profiles can be used to interpret aquifer and aquitard morphology or internal hydrogeologic properties as we move away from the boreholes. So the panel on the lower right shows the result of a neural network that was used to predict hydraulic conductivity from an electrical resistivity survey that's shown on the upper right. Here, the network was trained on Packer test hydraulic conductivity measurements that were made in the 3 boreholes at 1 meter vertical intervals. So this work has been published this year in the Journal of Applied Geophysics, and the contact for this work is Greg Oldenburger. Finally, now we turn to the bedrock aquifer field test sites. The first one up in Ottawa is the GSC's Bells Corners Borehole Calibration Facility. And we've also carried out research with the University of Guelph at their bedrock borehole facility on the Guelph campus. Both sites are located in different but complementary sedimentary bedrock basin settings, and they represent a whole range of carbonate and siliciclastic bedrock types that are pretty typically encountered in Ontario, but also more broadly across Canada. We've established a 5-year research partnership with the University of Guelph, exchanging techniques and developing knowledge back and forth at our respective calibration facilities to support future research. Now, a key aspect of this work is also evaluating new borehole logging technology to measure downhole porosity. So just a little bit of background on our 2 field sites. The Bells Corners Borehole Calibration Facility has been operated by the GSC now for over 40 years, and it's made up of 6 deep bedrock boreholes that range in depth from 75 to 300 meters. The holes intersect dolostone, sandstone, and Precambrian basement, and we maintain cores from all the boreholes in our collections. Over the last 5 years, we've been leveraging the facility to study the regionally important Nepean sandstone aquifer. Because in addition to fracture flow, you can see from this core microphotograph here that the matrix porosity in the sandstone is also a factor in how groundwater moves through. Now G360's bedrock borehole cluster in Guelph is composed of 7 vertical boreholes and 3 angled holes. The boreholes intersect the Silurian carbonate sequence of the Niagara Escarpment region. And here's a stratigraphic column here of the boreholes. The units shown in blue are considered aquifers, particularly the Gasport Formation is considered a primary aquifer in the Guelph area. It's overlain by a series of finer grain units in the Aramosa, which are shown here in the brown tones. These images provide a sense of the range of porosity types that are found in the aquifer, from small fabric selective reefal structures to non-fabric selective vugs, fractures, and even large voids. Now, just to add before I move on, the boreholes are drilled on the outer flanks of a buried bedrock valley. So as part of our bedrock aquifer study with the university, the GSC traveled to Guelph last summer to support their study underway at the University of Waterloo and the University of Guelph on buried valley aquifers, with a particular interest in the contact zone at the base of the sediment. So we collected 3 kilometers of high resolution seismic reflection data, both past their borehole, the boreholes at their calibration facility, but also at another site of interest where known buried bedrock valleys exist, just a bit north and west of Guelph. We also collected over 100 passive seismic recordings along the reflection profiles, and we're using the data sets, both data sets together to help interpret the depth of the buried bedrock valleys in these complex glacial settings. So we're learning more about the definition of the bedrock surface, particularly the sediment architecture, and importantly, the potential recharge pathways down into the bedrock aquifers. The contacts for this work are André Pougin and Barbara Diedeker. The resulting seismic data are going to be published this winter in an open file. So finally, I'll wrap up with some new borehole technology that we're evaluating at our 2 bedrock calibration facilities. Borehole nuclear magnetic resonance, or NMR, provide us with a way of measuring water content or porosity in saturated settings, and allows us to estimate the distribution of pore sizes along a borehole, and also to calculate permeability using a logging tool. Now, this technology is actually familiar to us. It's based on the similar principles to medical MRI and using magnetic fields to look for hydrogen protons in groundwater. This is mature technology in the oil and gas sector. They've been using these tools for over 50 years. The tools are really large. They're over 1 foot in diameter and many meters tall, requiring cranes to assemble. And so it's only been in the last 10 years that the tools have been adapted to slim hole models that are suitable to log the types of boreholes that we have for hydrogeological studies. And the GSC has recently acquired one of these tools. And so we designed a study to evaluate NMR from a hydrogeological perspective in Southern Ontario sedimentary bedrock at our 2 borehole calibration facilities. So here's an example of what one of these logs would look like. This is from the Guelph site. The outermost line here from the NMR porosity log shows you the total porosity in the bedrock measured along the well. The colors just represent the distribution of pore sizes. So the blue represents water contained in larger pores that could be, that's considered mobile water or could be contributing to the effective porosity. And the green and the red just represent water that's contained in smaller pores and more restricted from flow. What we found when we compared this data to core puck measurements was that the data agreed very well. Overall within about 4 porosity units, both within the sandstone in Ottawa and the dolostone in Guelph. But what we did notice was that there were intervals, particularly down in this vuggy aquifer unit, the Gasport, that there were areas where the core pucks and the NMR did not agree. And in fact, the NMR was showing higher water contents. And we interpret that this is a result of issues of scale, where the NMR tool is looking over a larger volume around the well. The core pucks are limited to small samples of core that are necessarily chosen in intervals that are unfractured or not vuggy. So where are we going next here? Well, this brings us to the current phase of our study, which is using medical CT scans in a novel way to look at the core porosity on a common scale to the NMR, because we realized that we were really comparing 2 things that were at different scales. So to support the evaluation, we needed something that could look at core porosity on a meter scale, on the same scale as the NMR. So if we want to use NMR to predict permeability in rock or sediment, we want to better understand how interconnected the pore network is. This medical CT scanning methodology is helping us to do that. So what you're seeing here on the lower panel is an image of a dry scan through CT scan through the center of the pore, where the black spaces represent low density or air or pore space. But this doesn't really tell us much about the interconnectedness of the pores, only about the pore space. So Stephanie Larmigna from GSC Quebec is contributing a novel core flooding technique that she developed to scan both dry and saturated states of the core. With her methodology, the core is placed on a CT scanning bed in a special core holder, and it's first scanned dry. And then it's flooded under a gentle vacuum for 48 hours and scanned again. The images, both dry and saturated, are subtracted from one another, so the rock densities cancel each other out, and we end up with a map of where water replaces air. Now, she has just recently published a paper with Terry Carter looking at this very technique in Silurian carbonates in southern Ontario. So these are 3D images of this water replacement in the cores from our 2 borehole bedrock calibration sites. So this tells us about the interconnectedness of the porosity and the vugs in the cores. So this is from the Gasport Formation in Guelph. And what you're seeing here really is where water is moving through or interconnected through the pores. So we have, it's interesting, we can see a number of layers that are less porous and some intervals that are extremely porous, and even with vertical refill features that cross through the core. This is from the Nepean sandstone, which is a different appearing porosity. It's much more uniform and intergranular. So this will really help us relate the mobile content, water content that we're seeing from the NMR logs to future calculations of permeability, which is where we want to take this study next. So I'll just close off by saying that the work at all of our test sites really highlights how data sets from well-studied field sites is supporting methods development in hydrogeophysical characterization of both glacial and bedrock aquifer systems. And I'll just close off with some upcoming information about talks upcoming. We'll be presenting a number of more detailed presentations of all of these activities at the OGS Open House coming up in February. So there's a whole series of talks on the surficial model, the Thorncliffe Formation, updates on Canada Warm Water that Melissa's just presented, and also a couple of talks on geophysical methods and methods development. Well, thank you very much.